Immigration has been a wedge issue in elections around the world. Here in Canada, less so, but it's still factored into last night's debate. Margaret Eaton is Executive Director of the Toronto Region Immigrant Employment Council, TRIAC, and she joins us now on why, economically speaking, newcomers matter. Margaret, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you very much.
The issue of immigration, of course, did come up last night. Maxime Bernier, the leader of the People's Party, making sure that it did come up. Let's just play a little bit of what he had to say, and then we'll come back and chat, okay?
Great.
Sheldon, if you would.
Actually, Canada receives more immigrants per capita than any other Western countries, 3 times higher than the US. They're all for mass immigration. I'm for a sustainable immigration, and that's why we must have fewer immigrants, a maximum of 150,000 a year, with more economic immigrants for our country.
Let's pick that apart a little bit, and then we'll broaden the discussion as well. You heard Maxime Bernier say Canada has embraced, quote unquote, mass immigration. How accurate is that?
I don't think that's very accurate. We're bringing in about 1% of our population each year.
About 300,000 people?
About 300,000 people. And most economists would agree that that's about what you need in order to replace people. So right now, the birth rate of Canada is about 1.6. We actually need about 2.1 people in order to keep our population level just at a steady level. And we're not doing that. So we don't want to be like Japan, where they have such a crisis and declining population that they're relying on robots. We really need to increase the number of people coming into Canada to make sure that we maintain our standard of living.
Is that a moral case you're making, or a business case, or what case are you making?
I think I'm making both. So I believe that there is a strong economic argument to be made. We know that immigrants bring growth and prosperity to our country. They bring international connections, ideas, diversity of thought, and we need that in Canada. We know places like New Brunswick have experienced negative population growth, and businesses are crying for people to do the work. Quebec right now has 120,000 job vacancies that they cannot fill. And so we actually need people to be coming into the country to take those jobs. But even there is that moral argument to be made as well, that we have international agreements that require us to take a certain level of asylum seekers and refugee claimants so that we can address the huge issues that are going on right now in migration, where there are more people on the move right now than have been since the Second World War.
Mr. Bernier says if you want to make the moral point, 2 things. Number 1, charity starts at home, and he would like more focus on the people who are already here. And point 2, that the people who are coming into Canada don't share, in his view, quote unquote, Canadian values, and that's a concern. Could you speak to those issues?
Right. Well, interestingly, the people that are coming in as asylum seekers speak excellent English for the most part. 70 to 80% speak English. They have post-secondary education. They actually can contribute. And in fact, there was a pilot project in Chatham where they brought in 6 asylum-seeking families. They didn't know whether they'd be staying in the country. They still had to go through the refugee process to be approved. But they were desperate in Chatham for people to work. And so they actually brought them in to do that work. So I think it doesn't really matter how you come into the country, whether you're an asylum seeker, a refugee, or an immigrant, you can make a contribution and you can fit in.
What kind of jobs would the people in southwestern Ontario that you just referred to be doing?
In southwestern Ontario, there's certainly a tremendous need for agricultural workers. The mushroom industry is desperate for workers right now. So, and they're turning down business, in fact, the mushroom growers in Ontario, because they can't find people to do the work.
We hear this expression, people without jobs, jobs without people. It's both sides of the coin.
Yes.
I wonder, we played a little bit of Mr. Bernier's comments from last night. I wonder if you heard anything else from any of the other leaders last night on the issue of immigration that stuck out for you.
I was interested in the debate around Bill 21 in Quebec. So we know that there is a policy there that if you wear a religious symbol, you are no longer enabled to work in municipal or government jobs. And it was really only Trudeau that said he would do something about that. So none of them want to address...
Not quite. Hang on, not quite.
Okay, you're right.
He said, I'm the only one on stage who hasn't forsworn the possibility of intervening if the courts make a certain decision. He hasn't exactly
Right,
jumped
yeah.
in with all feet right now.
You know, you're quite right. And the response has been very disappointing. Nahid Nenshi had a wonderful piece, the mayor of Calgary, talking about how we need to be standing up for human rights. And religious freedom is a cornerstone of what we expect of Canada and Canadians.
They're afraid of losing seats in Quebec. That's why
That's
no one
it.
wants to go there. You
That's
know that.
exactly it.
Has immigration, in your view, turned out to be the wedge issue in this campaign that some people either feared or hoped it would become?
Right. It hasn't. And that has surprised us. In the immigration sector, we've been preparing for this and getting ready with our champions and spokespeople to talk about the issue should it take an ugly turn. And it actually hasn't. So it was good news in a way when Maxime Bernier put up that billboard that said no to mass migration.
Well, he didn't put it up. A third party put it up.
Party.
With his picture and his party's name on it.
Right. So the response to that was wonderful. It very quickly got taken down because of the reaction of Canadian citizens and the sign company who said we made a mistake. So that was very reassuring to all of us that this wasn't going to be a negative in this campaign.
There are different ways, of course, to get into this country. There is the traditional immigration stream. There is asylum seekers who have got, I guess, a bit of attention when they tried to walk across the border.
Right.
And there are refugees. So there are different lanes, if you like, for coming into Canada. Does your organization make a distinction among those three different lanes?
Yeah. So my organization, TRIAC, works with skilled immigrants, so people who have international experience and education. And it doesn't matter how you walked in. It could be through family reunification or a spouse of an applicant, a refugee. As long as you're a permanent resident, we're happy to help.
Let's go back to Quebec. You know that there was some consternation about people walking across the American border in Quebec into Canada, Quebec, part of Canada. Did you find that controversial?
We were concerned that it would start to create a narrative of the good immigrant and the bad immigrant. We don't want that. And so it was concerning that that could have been the wedge issue in this election, perhaps. But part of the problem is the fact that we still have this safe third country agreement, which means that our relationship with the United States back in the day was such that it was a fair option to say, if you arrive through a regular border, but you first arrived in America, we want you to go back to America and claim your asylum status there. That was when America was a safe place. It's not so safe anymore for asylum seekers and refugees. So now we have this uncomfortable situation of people trying to find a way to get into the country, not through those regular border stops, but in a regular landing. So we do need to change that agreement with the US so that people can claim at the regular intersections where we've always welcomed asylum seekers.
But I guess it didn't become that big a deal compared to the United States because we did not have tens of thousands of people from Mexico, for example, trying to cross our border.
Right.
We had a couple of thousand people or a few thousand people try to cross the border in that way. Did that contribute to this being kind of a non-story in the way that it has not been in the States?
Perhaps. We just don't have the numbers. It can be just that numbers game. I think some people tried to inflate it. It was only about 45,000 people over the last 3 years. It's not that many in a country of our size.
How understanding are you, though, and organizations that do what you do, how understanding are you of the fact that whether we like it or not, Quebec's a distinct society and they have a different view about who should be an immigrant to the province and what kinds of skills and qualities they need to bring?
Well, I like to think that they're still a part of Canada and share Canadian values. And those Canadian values are of tolerance, of respect for difference, of respect for religious freedom. So it's hugely disappointing to see them chart a very different path from that. And then there was also some polling done to show that some Canadians in other parts of Canada actually agree with that. So there has been a rise of intolerance, I would say, over the last few years. And it is enabled by that, the enabling forces in the US, where they speak quite openly and candidly about their racial and religious intolerance. So I do fear that spreads.
New immigrants, I think, usually arrive at a major port of entry like Montreal or Toronto or Vancouver. Smaller cities outside those three major urban agglomerations have shrinking populations, and they, I think, might very well like to see some of the new immigrants, instead of settling in those three places, come to their lesser populated places. Has there been, in your judgment, any major uptake by any government to see to it that that happens?
Yes, the federal government has created the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Project. So that's a project to bring 2,000 immigrants to the Atlantic region. And the interesting part about the project is that it engages employers. So employers choose the new immigrants to come in, but they also have a responsibility for settlement, not just for the principal applicant, but for the whole family. Because we know if the family isn't happy, they'll end up moving. They won't stay. And that's been a huge issue in the Atlantic region, where people settle, they stay there a couple of years, and then they want to be with their families in Mississauga. So that
is understandable.
It is understandable. And if you don't find that the culture is welcoming, if there isn't a mosque, if you can't buy the food that you want, then you're going to go somewhere else. So that's been a huge issue. So early results for that project have been quite strong. And in fact, they are going to be reproducing that in northern and rural communities. So we will see that program rolled out shortly, depending, I guess, on the outcome of the election in Northern Ontario.
Is it known, I don't know if you have studies that indicate this, that if a newcomer stays X number of years in a particular locality, chances are they're going to stay there?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that statistic, but let's put that down as something to look for.
I'm going to write that down right
Yes.
now. Is it, I mean, if, for example, you talked about the fact that, if there's not a mosque there, it's going to be difficult for a Muslim family to potentially stay in a place
Right.
where religion is important, but they don't feel that. How much accommodation do you think an existing locality ought to make to accommodate the different customs of newcomers who are coming in?
Well, I think we pride ourselves on being a welcoming nation. But some places in the country are not as welcoming, and I think what they're finding is they're not getting the benefit of immigration. So I know one great example, a story I heard, I believe it was about Halifax, where there was a skating club, and the skating club was going to be shutting down because there just wasn't enough interest in taking lessons anymore. Someone from the Chinese community found out about that, and Saturday morning came, time to sign up for lessons, and there was a lineup around the block of Chinese immigrants who wanted to learn how to skate. So one interesting thought on this is, if you want to stay the same, if you want your community to stay the same, you might have to change a little bit. You might have to welcome others. And that way, immigrants will help you in terms of maintaining your skating clubs. It's become a succession strategy for people on the East Coast. Your kids don't want to take over your business. Maybe a new immigrant would like to take over that business with you.
I always wondered, Nazem Kadri, when he played for the Toronto Maple Leafs, I always wondered how many Muslim kids learned how to skate because Nazem Kadri played for the Leafs.
Exactly. Representation is so important.
Yeah, gotcha. Margaret, it's good of you to come into TVO tonight and share your views with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Margaret Eaton, the Executive Director of the Toronto Region Immigrant Employment Council.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.